this simple text. The draft implores a swift end to the conflict and further urges a lasting peace. We can and should and must agree on that. Mr. President, it's time to vote. I thank you.
Just now, the representative of the U.S., of France, put forward the proposal to adjourn the meeting until 3 p.m. on the 25th of February. The U.S. representative expressed opposition to it. Pursuant to Rule 33 of the 33.3 of the Provisional Rules of Procedure of the Security Council, I shall put the proposal of France to a vote. Will those in favor of the proposal please raise their hand? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows. The proposal France received 6 votes in favor, 3 votes against, 6 abstentions. The proposal is rejected, having failed to obtain 9 affirmative votes. The Security Council will begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. Stroke 2025, stroke 119. Namely, the text of a draft resolution submitted by the United States of America. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution before it. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make a statement before the vote. I now give the floor to the representative of the U.S.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to thank the Presidency for scheduling this meeting today. Today, we stand on the precipice of history with a solemn task: creating conditions to end the bloodiest war on the European continent since the successive cataclysms that spurred the creation of this council. In June of 1945, the nations of the world stood together, bloodied from 2 brutal wars, and made a decision. On the day we signed the UN Charter, we cast aside despair and chose hope. We set aside hatred and chose reason. And most importantly, we turned away from the death march of war and charted a path to peace. It is time for us to bring the UN, and specifically the Security Council, back to its original purpose: the maintenance of international peace and security, including the peaceful settlement of disputes. Let us now step up as Council members to chart a path forward so that the Security Council can do its job and end the horror. Generations of Ukrainians and Russians have died, husbands who will never return home to their wives, children will never find the arms of their mothers, parents who will never again see their sons and daughters. The scale of the suffering is staggering. The war has also brought the world closer to a nuclear confrontation once again raising the specter of fire, ash, and total destruction. Thus, it is our responsibility as UN Security Council members to help end the agony and pull ourselves back from the brink. Continuing to engage in rhetorical rivalries in New York may make diplomats feel vindicated, but it will not save souls on the battlefield. Let us prove to ourselves and to our citizens that we can come together and agree on the most basic principles. Let us show one another that the bold vision of peace that once pulled us out of hell can prevail. Our draft resolution is elegant in its simplicity, a symbolic, simple first step toward peace. The 3 brief paragraphs echo the spirit of the UN Charter and must, as in 1945, affirm that this war is awful, that the UN can help end it, and that peace is possible. We hear our European colleagues when they say they want a durable peace, but not at any cost. Mr. President, to them I would say, rest assured that we too seek this durable peace, and we would remind these colleagues that this resolution is not a peace deal, and it imposes no costs. Rather, this resolution represents the path to peace. We urge all Security Council members to join the United States under the bold leadership of President Trump in this effort to vanquish the scourge of this war. We urge all Council members to join us on this path to peace. As a final note, the United States has called this meeting, which has already, with U.S. assent, been rescheduled once. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the U.S. for the statement. Now I'll give the floor to the UK.
Thank you, President. We are introducing amendments on behalf of Denmark, Greece, France, Slovenia, and the United Kingdom. There can be no equivalence between Russia and Ukraine in how this Council refers to this war. Russia chose to launch a war of aggression against a sovereign state, costing hundreds of thousands of lives. The Council must be clear on this to find a path to a sustainable peace. We must also be clear that peace must respect the UN Charter and Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. These are core principles. Upholding the Charter is the responsibility of every member of the UN, especially this Council. Earlier today, in the UN General Assembly, there was widespread support for these amendments among the wider UN membership. We would hope that all in this Council would be able to support similar language. As such, Mr. President, we request, first, to replace, I quote, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, unquote, in paragraph 1 with, quote, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, end quote. Second, to insert a new preambular paragraph 3 to read as follows, quote, reaffirming its commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, extending to its territorial waters. Third, and to amend the operational paragraph so it would read, quote, implores a swift end to the conflict and further urges a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace between Ukraine and Russia in line with the UN Charter and the principles of sovereign equality and territorial integrity of states, end quote. I thank you, President.
I thank the UK for the statement, and I give the floor to France.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, the amendments that we are proposing and that the representative of the United Kingdom has just presented aim to show our resolute commitment after 3 years of war to a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine, which must be based on the United Nations Charter and international law. Peace which must respect the sovereignty, the territorial integrity, and the independence of Ukraine. A peace which can in no case be a synonym for capitulation of the aggressed state. These amendments also aim to recall that there is an aggressor and an aggressed state. I would recall that after 3 years, day to day, Russia attacked a sovereign state which posed no threat to it, where it already illegally occupied a part of the territory since 2014. France this morning already with 23 EU member states and the United Kingdom, 3 amendments to the resolution of the US in the General Assembly. We will remain fully committed to supporting the UN Charter and its principles and guaranteeing that the peace that we are all calling for in Ukraine is solid, lasting and just. Thank you.
I thank France for the statement, and I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, the American draft resolution on the Ukrainian crisis we consider overall as a common sense initiative, as a step in the right direction, which reflects the will of the new administration of the White House to really contribute to the peaceful settlement of the conflict. We appreciate what was already said several times by the President Trump, namely the understanding that the crisis in Ukraine has its own deeply rooted reasons. So as to make sure that this initiative is to a greater extent in line with the understandings arrived at during the Russian-American contacts at the highest level, we propose an amendment to it on the need to eradicate the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis.
After swift end of the conflict, insert including addressing its root causes.
Without this, it will be impossible to attain a lasting and sustainable settlement. It will not be possible to arrive at the settlement that's talked about in the only operative paragraph of the document. We also have a second amendment, which is a more accurate reflection of the agenda item and the nature of the crisis. We propose that in the first preamble paragraph, we talk about conflict around Ukraine, and in the only operative paragraph, we talk about the lasting peace in Ukraine.
Russian Federation-Ukraine conflict with conflict around Ukraine, and in the operative paragraph replaced between Ukraine and the Russian Federation within Ukraine.
We cannot agree with the interpretation of the conflict as an exclusively two-way confrontation, whereas it has become clear a long time ago that its Western and first of all European sponsors are working through the Kiev regime. For them, presenting this as a Russia-Ukrainian conflict is a very convenient view of the world. It's very comfortable to hide behind that. Otherwise, they would have to acknowledge the unseemly role they've played in the genesis of the Ukrainian conflict. And we call on the members of the Council to support these amendments. As regards the amendments submitted by the European countries, well, they quite clearly replace the essence of the American text. They make it into yet another anti-Russia ultimatum in the spirit of the Bergenstock process. We are going to vote against them and call upon others to follow suit. I thank you.
Council members have before them 5 proposed amendments to the text of the draft resolution contained in document S/2025/112 submitted by the United States of America. 3 of these amendments were submitted jointly by Denmark, France, Greece, Slovenia, and the United Kingdom, and 2 were submitted by the Russian Federation. Rule 36 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure states the following. If 2 or more amendments to a motion or draft resolution are proposed, the President shall rule on the order in which they are to be voted upon. Ordinarily, the Security Council shall first vote on the amendment furthest removed in substance from the original proposal, and then on the amendment next furthest removed until all amendments have been put to the vote. But when an amendment adds to or deletes from the text of a motion or draft resolution, that amendment shall be voted on first. Accordingly, I intend to put the proposed amendments to the vote first. I shall now put to the vote the proposed amendment to preambular paragraph 1 and OP1 submitted by the Russian Federation and contained in document S/2025/118. Will those in favor of the proposed amendment contained in document S/2025/118 please raise their hand. Against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows. 1 vote in favor, 7 votes against, 7 abstentions. The proposed amendment has not been adopted, having failed to obtain the required number of votes. I shall now put to the vote the proposed amendment to preambular paragraph 1 submitted by Denmark, France, Greece, Slovenia, and the UK and contained in document S/2025/114. Will those in favor of the proposed amendment contained in document S/2025/114 please raise their hand. Those against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows. 6 votes in favor, 1 vote against, 8 abstentions. The proposed amendment has not been adopted, having failed to obtain the required number of votes. I shall now put to the vote the proposed amendment to insert an additional and third preambular paragraph submitted by Denmark, France, Greece, Slovenia, and the UK and contained in document S/2025/115. Will those in favor of the proposed amendment contained in document S/2025/115 please raise their hand? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows. 9 votes in favor, 1 vote against, 5 abstentions. The proposed amendment has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I shall now put to the vote the proposed amendment to operational paragraph 1 submitted by Denmark, France, Greece, Slovenia, and the UK and contained in document S/2025/116. Will those in favor of the proposed amendment contained in document S/2025/116 please raise their hand? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows. 11 votes in favor, 1 vote against, 3 abstentions. The proposed amendment has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I shall now put to the vote the proposed amendment to OP1 submitted by the Russian Federation and contained in document S/2025/117. Will those in favor of the proposed amendment contained in document S/2025/117 please raise their hand? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows. 4 votes in favor, 6 votes against, 5 abstentions. The proposed amendment has not been adopted, having failed to obtain the required number of votes. It is my understanding that the Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution contained in document S/2025/112 submitted by the United States of America. I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2025/112 please raise their hand? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows: 10 votes in favor, 0 against, 5 abstentions. The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 2774 of 2025. I shall now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and colleagues, the United States sincerely appreciates Council members' support for this resolution and applauds the action, the first this Council has taken in 3 years on Ukraine, to firmly call for an end to the conflict. This resolution puts us on the path to peace. It is a first step, but a crucial one of which we should all be proud. Now we must use it to build a peaceful future for Ukraine, Russia, and the international community. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président.
President, France did not vote in favor of the draft resolution presented by the United States. Indeed, while we are fully committed to peace in Ukraine, we call for comprehensive, just and lasting peace, and certainly not for capitulation of the victim. We call for a peace which should be founded on the Charter of the United Nations and on international law, which should mark a clear distinction between the aggressor, Russia, and the aggressor state, the victim, Ukraine. There will be no peace and security anywhere if aggressions are rewarded and if the law of the jungle wins. The peace that we want must respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the independence of Ukraine. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Today marks 3 years since Russia's unprovoked, full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Today, we remember the millions of Ukrainians displaced, the tens of thousands of civilians killed, the lives destroyed by President Putin's imperial ambition. As the Secretary-General said again yesterday, this war is illegal, a clear violation of the UN Charter, and a threat to the core principles of the UN. No one wants peace more than Ukraine. A just peace, one that honours the terms of our charter, will endure. And the terms of the peace must send a message that aggression does not pay. This is why there can be no equivalence between Russia and Ukraine in how this Council refers to this war. If we are to find a path to sustainable peace, the Council must be clear on the war's origins. We also owe it to the people of Ukraine who have suffered so much. Russia chose to launch a war of aggression against a sovereign state, but again today is seeking to obfuscate that fact. We must also insist on respect for the UN Charter and Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. Upholding the Charter is the responsibility of every member of the UN, and especially every member of this Council. Every member. What, how, and on what terms this war ends can only be decided by negotiations with Ukraine. No peace will be sustainable without Ukraine's consent. We regret that our proposals making these points clear were not taken on board, and as such, we could not support this resolution. But we share the ambition to find a lasting end to this war, supported by robust security arrangements that ensure Ukraine never again has to face Russia's attack. As my Prime Minister has made clear, the UK remains ready to play its part. We will continue to provide Ukraine with the support it needs to protect and defend itself and its people. We remind the Council that Russia could achieve this tomorrow by ceasing its aggression and withdrawing its forces from all of Ukraine. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom. I shall now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is exactly 3 years since the Russian Federation launched its aggression on Ukraine, in clear violation of the UN Charter. After 3 years of death and destruction, a just and lasting peace is long overdue. There is nobody, but nobody, who wants peace more than Ukrainians and Europeans. The fundamental question remains, how should the Council, tasked with upholding international peace and security, pronounce itself about peace? Perhaps we should lend an ear to the Secretary General, who for 3 years has been underlining that a lasting peace needs to be firmly anchored in the UN Charter and its principles. A saying goes that a person convinced against their will is against you still. There will be peace, but it needs to be just, and it needs to last. We understand and respect the aim of the US resolution, to set in motion a path leading to peace, to agree on a baseline leading to peace negotiations. We fully support this aim. However, for us it is vital to determine the frame accompanying any peace negotiations at the very outset. If you don't know where you're going, any road will lead you there. The least we should be able to agree is for the peace negotiations to be conducted within the frame of principles of the UN Charter, including its principle of sovereign equality and territorial integrity of states. and this was the aim of our proposed amendments, to align ourselves with principles of the UN Charter, as well as with clearly expressed message sent this morning from the General Membership to the Security Council. Unfortunately, the text we voted on fell short of our minimum requirements. Mr. President, Slovenia recognizes that this Council is finally moving towards its primary task with regard to the war on Ukraine, ensuring a just and lasting peace. Slovenia has been calling for peace in Ukraine for a long time. We hope to soon continue our work towards a resolution on Ukraine that reflects the views of the countries from the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia. I should now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Mr. President, for all states, large and small, the UN Charter is more than a promise. It is protection. It is a bedrock of global security. Protection of our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. Protection from a world where the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. That is why we must stand up against aggression whenever and wherever it occurs. Why we must uphold the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. That is why we have stood with Ukraine for 3 years. For Denmark, these principles are non-negotiable. We entered this council with a promise to stand up for international law. We intend to keep that promise. Colleagues, let there be no doubt, no one wants peace more than Ukraine. Denmark welcomes efforts and shares the ambition to bring this senseless war to an end, for this council to uphold its responsibility. But peace must be on the right terms. Regrettable, today's resolution falls far short of that vision. We need to reject the false equivalence between aggressor and victim. We need to reaffirm our commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We need a peace that is comprehensive, just and lasting, and in line with the UN Charter. Our amendments sought to address these issues. They represented the minimum that we believe we should all support. For these reasons, Denmark abstained on today's resolution. Mr. President, let me conclude by directly addressing the people of Ukraine. Denmark stands with you. We stand by your right to freely choose your future, to chart your own path, to simply exist. Denmark will not impose a peace upon you. We will work with you. We will support you. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark. I should now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. We believe there are two goals that everyone can agree on. One, this senseless and unlawful war must come to an end as soon as possible. And two, we must strive to uphold the fundamental principles of the UN Charter and international law. Now is the time to gather our wisdom and determination to simultaneously achieve both objectives as much as possible. In this light, the Republic of Korea voted in favor of the amendments proposed by 5 European countries, and we voted in favor of the draft resolution proposed by the United States. Although it is regrettable that the amendments we supported were not reflected. This war of aggression, waged by a permanent member of the Security Council, Russia, against a sovereign state, and the deadliest in Europe since World War II, has tragically claimed countless innocent lives and caused widespread destruction to the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. And this war is also shaking the structural foundations of the international order and the rules and norms that underpin it. The Security Council adopted this resolution of historic significance today, emphasizing the international community's aspiration for the swift end of the war. while also urging lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. In this connection, we hope that the adoption of this resolution will provide an opportunity for all relevant parties to further accelerate diplomatic efforts to achieve just, sustainable, and comprehensive
act and defend the United Nations Charter because the illegitimate and brutal attack against Ukraine continues 3 years since it has been launched. The Council should act and defend the United Nations Charter because the aggressor, the Russian Federation, is a permanent member of this body. And third, the Council should act and defend the United Nations Charter because this aggression undermines, with every passing day, the rules-based multilateralism, violating the United Nations Charter and the international law, including the international humanitarian law. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much, Mr. President.
感谢赫里斯泰亚先生的发言。我现在请荷兰乌克兰问题特使斯豪滕女士阁下发言。
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo for her briefing. Mr. President, in the cold light of day, 3 years after Russia's large-scale, unprovoked and illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we face a bleak and harsh reality, in which, if we do not act now, might is right. We cannot have the aggressor impose a deal on the victim, an aggressor who continues to intensify its attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Saturday's large-scale drone attacks do not show an intention by Russia to end this war. We cannot let a blatant violation of the UN Charter, a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, stand. This would create a dangerous precedent for the future, undermining the principles of international law and the sovereignty of all nations. Ukraine needs to be an equal partner in the negotiations. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And as the security of Europe is directly impacted, Europe should be involved too. Only inclusive negotiations can lead to a just and a lasting peace. Mr. President, this war must end, not just for the sake of Ukraine and Europe, but for the sake of the world. Russia's aggression has had devastating and long-lasting consequences for food security, for the environment, and for nuclear security. The Kingdom of the Netherlands calls on all countries that are enabling Russia's aggression to stop providing Moscow with a lifeline to prolong this unjust war. We call on all member states to help find a just, a lasting, and a comprehensive peace for the Ukrainian people, in accordance with the UN Charter. Changing borders by force must not be rewarded. We must uphold the Charter or risk living in a world where might is right. Thank you.
我感谢斯豪滕女士阁下的发言。现在发言名单上没有其他人，现在休会。